550 by 550, yeah. I'm gonna go to the modifier list, I'm gonna put 550 by 550 and 50 height. Gonna move this here. I'm gonna click on the grid and snap settings and by vertex. So right now I can click on vertex and snap from vertex to vertex, and if I'm using a middle point also, I can snap to the middle of this object and the middle of this object, yeah? So right now that's the new object. And I can go also here in the middle. So now I have my object. I'm gonna isolate this with Alt Q or right click. Let me unhide all and right click and use isolate selection. It's here, click on that. This is Alt Q. And now I have my object. And what I'm going to do now is to go to the modifier list, yeah, to the object, and apply an editable poly. So 3ds Studio Max is working very, very well with polys and editable polys. But what does it mean? It means I'm pushing the E button, editable poly, and now I have an editable poly, yeah, above the box that I already created. What does it mean? It means that right now I can select the vertices of this object. If I click on vertices, I can go and select each vertex of the object, and I can also move it, yeah, anywhere that I want, which is very important. I can select the edges, any edge from the object. I can also select the borders, which is the splines, and I can also select the faces of the object, which means I can change the object by only moving or scaling the faces of the object. This is very important because most of the complex objects are always made with editable polys in 3ds Studio Max. Right now, all the fancy objects that you see on the internet, like sofas or scenes, they're all made with editable poly. With F2, F3, F4, I can see different views of the same object, yeah? I explained that in the last. With G, if I push G, I hide the grid. So I will use F2, yeah? With the F2, you can see the face red, or it can hide and it shows only the line. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to use the edge, and I'm going to select these two edges, this and this, with the control pushed from the keyboard and the left mouse button. I'm going to select these edges, and on the edit edges, I'm going to go to connect, and I'm going to click on this. It's going to create another edge in between them. I'm telling the program that those 4 edges that I just clicked earlier, I want them all to connect through another edge. And clicking by the button on the right is going to open the settings. But if I click on the connect, it's just going to create an edge in between them directly, exactly in the middle. So I don't want that, even though it can be very useful. But what I want is to create directly 2 edges. Code, I'm gonna go Ctrl Z back, and now I'm gonna click on connect, and I'm gonna use 2 edges. And I created 2 edges between those edges, yeah? Why do I want to do that? Well, it's very simple. Now I'm going in the plan, because I have the other table that I created earlier. I double click with my left mouse button on this. I'm going to T, top, zoom, and then I'm going to move this here, because I have underneath my old object that we just created, yeah? I'm gonna do the same, double click on the edge, it's gonna select the whole spline, and then I'm gonna go on the OZ axis, click on that, and I'm gonna move the other edge. What I'm going to do now, I'm gonna select these two edges, and the other four, and I'm gonna use exactly the same thing as before. Connect to, okay. Now I'm going to, if I don't click, so if I click on one and then I click outside of the object, it's gonna deselect the object. So now I'm gonna select all of them by double click on it. I'm gonna unhide all because I have the object there as the old object as a reference. I'm gonna move it here in this corner because this here I know that there are 50 millimeters. I'm gonna select also the other one, do exactly the same, move it here. And now I have my table. But what I'm gonna do now is to go under to select, I'm gonna isolate the object, and I'm gonna select these four polygons, and I'm going to extrude these polygons. So I can click on this button and extrude them directly, or I can click on the button next to it and say I want to extrude this by 500. So I'm gonna hit the extrude button and I'm gonna say here 500, okay, and I just extruded my object. So what I did right now, I just created, I'm gonna unselect everything and move the object next to it. And I just created more or less the same object, but is made by one object. Well, of course, here we apply the chamfer, which I'm also going to apply here. So what I'm going to do that, I'm gonna select these edges one by one, and also this, and also this four, and I'm gonna use an extrude. And with the Z button, I'm gonna make them planar on the Z axis, and on the front view, I'm gonna try to move them here. So I'm just trying to create this small edge here, the same as here, and then I'm going to apply a chamfer on it. So I'm just gonna go here and copy the chamfer that we had before on this object, paste, and now I have more or less the same object. So as you can see now, here I have the table made exactly how it's going to be in reality, made of a top part and 4 legs, and here I have the same table but made all of it from one object. Now I'm gonna apply the same material as the other one. Open the material editor, click on the material, assign material to selection, yeah? And now let's see how it's looking. So as you can see, I could say they are quite looking the same, more or less. I don't see any difference. Okay, so this was the editable poly method. So the first one was with the primitives, where we used boxes. The second one is with the editable poly, And the last one is going to be a different method, but we're going to use exactly the same ideas. So in reality, well, in general, in 3ds Studio Max, you need to see very well in 3D space. So this means that to understand a little bit how geometry works and how object works. So to create big object, you can always split it in small objects and create those ones, and in the end to have the full object. Or you can create a big object and try to transform that big object into small ones. Okay, now to see the last method. In the last method, we're going to use line.